When we hear the word bond, uh, our minds often jump straight to a legal context, right? Like bail a payment to get someone out of jail.
Yeah, that's the most common association for sure.
But what if we told you that money, held as a guarantee, plays this crucial and sometimes, well, surprising role in navigating international borders for everything from education to family reunification?
It really does. It's a concept woven through so many different facets of global mobility. Sometimes it helps smooth the path. Other times it presents a pretty significant hurdle.
Exactly. So today we're taking a deep dive into this fascinating world of bonds in immigration and international travel.
We've looked at quite a bit official government documents, legal guides, even some recent news developments.
Our mission is pretty simple. We want to break down what these bonds are, how they actually function in different situations, who they impact, and importantly, what some recent developments might mean for people moving across the globe.
You should definitely walk away with a much clearer understanding of these sometimes complex mechanisms.
Okay, let's unpack this. So let's maybe kick things off with a great example of a bond actually being a facilitator, making things easier for people. We're looking at an initiative in Ireland called Education Bond Ireland.
That's right. Education Bond Ireland, it's a service run by a company called Transformate. And crucially, it's supported by the Irish government and its immigration authority, the ISD.
Right.
Its whole design is basically to streamline the visa application process for certain international students coming to Ireland.
So how does it simplify things? Because, we know for many international students, proving you have the money for your stay, that can involve a mountain of paperwork.
Oh, absolutely. Bank statements going back months, sponsor details. It can be incredibly invasive and honestly very time-consuming.
Right.
Education Bond Ireland offers a real alternative to all of that.
Who is it for specifically?
It's specifically for degree program students and also Chinese language students who are attending an MEI-listed school.
And instead of that deep financial dive.
Exactly. Instead of that, the student just registers online and lodges a $10,000 boxed bond into an advised bank account.
Okay, so the money isn't like a fee that just disappears. It's held for them.
That's the crucial difference, yes. The $10,000 is held continuously. And here's the key part. Once the student arrives in Ireland and successfully registers with the immigration authorities, that bond becomes cashable.
Cashable meaning?
Meaning the student can access it, it confirms the funds exist, and importantly, that they are reserved solely for the student's personal use during their studies. Think of it like a refundable deposit proving their financial stability.
Wow, that sounds like a significant stress reducer for students heading to Ireland.
It really can be.
What are the big benefits here, from Ireland's perspective too?
Well, the program boasts a much swifter visa application process overall. For the student, it removes the need for those invasive financial details. It cuts down on queries about receipts and visas, eliminates piles of paperwork.
Less hassle.
Definitely less hassle. And it smooths out communication with the visa office. For Ireland, it's a smart way to attract legitimate students while still ensuring they have adequate funds, but without that heavy administrative lift of traditional financial checks.
So clear benefits for both sides, it seems. Can you walk us through, just quickly, how a student would actually pay and then get this bond money back?
Sure. So to pay, the student goes to the Education Bond Ireland website, fills out a registration form, and then does a bank transfer for the full €10,000.
Okay.
Then they just need to email a few key documents, the payment receipt, a copy of their passport photo page, and their school offer letter or invoice.
Straightforward enough.
Once those are received and the payment clears, they get an official bond receipt by email. That receipt is what they submit with their visa application.
And getting it back once they're in Ireland. Yeah.
Also, pretty straightforward. They email the service again, this time with a copy of their passport showing the immigration stamp they got at the airport, proof of registration from their university or school, which includes their Irish residential address and their new Irish bank account details.
And then the money is released to their Irish account.
Exactly. The $10,000 goes right into their local bank account for their use.
It's really quite remarkable how this bond in Ireland functions as such a clear facilitator. It simplifies things for genuine students and, presumably, reduces the workload for immigration services too.
It does seem well designed for that purpose.
But now let's pivot. because we need to talk about a very different application of bonds, one that's far more about control and assurance, particularly within the United States immigration system.
Right. In the United States, immigration bonds primarily serve as a mechanism of control and assurance, especially for individuals who are in detention under Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE.
So when we talk about an ICE bond, what exactly is it? Is it basically like the criminal bail bond most people are familiar with?
Well, it's similar in principle, money for release, but quite distinct in how it works. An ICE bond is essentially a promise made directly to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
A promise to do what?
When someone accepts this bond and is released from detention, they're promising to attend all their scheduled court hearings and to follow the immigration judge's orders, even if that ultimately means complying with the deportation order.
And that promise has real financial backing, right? Like putting skin in the game, so to speak.
Exactly. It's backed by a monetary payment, usually from a friend or family member who has legal immigration status in the U.S. themselves.
That's an important detail. The payer needs legal status.
Yes, and here's the crucial part. If the individual shows up for absolutely all their hearings and interviews, the money is returned at the very end of their case. But, and this is a big but, if even one hearing is missed, the individual is likely ordered deported in their absence, and that entire bond amount is forfeited. Gone.
Wow. That's a really high stake. A huge potential loss financially and personally.
It absolutely is. The consequences of missing a hearing are severe.
So who actually qualifies for a bond in the U.S. system? I imagine there are quite a few restrictions.
You're right. Not everyone even gets the opportunity for a bond hearing. There are specific reasons someone might be ineligible.
Like what?
For instance, individuals with certain criminal convictions, things like drug possession or sale, many theft offenses, or what are termed aggravated felonies, are generally disqualified. Also, having a past deportation order or certain pending asylum interviews can make someone ineligible.
So a criminal history is a major, major factor. But I understand there might be some exceptions. What about proving U.S. citizenship?
Yes, that's a very important point. Even with some convictions, if someone has been detained for a prolonged period, that might open up an opportunity to apply for bond later. But the most fundamental exception is this. If an individual can definitively prove they are a U.S. citizen, they simply cannot be detained for immigration purposes.
Regardless of criminal history or past deportation.
Regardless, citizenship overrides those factors in terms of immigration detention itself. It's a key distinction.
That makes sense. Okay, so if someone is potentially eligible, how do they go about requesting a bond hearing? You mentioned preparation is vital.
It's absolutely critical because often an individual really only gets one shot at a bond hearing.
One chance.
Generally, yes. They can ask for a hearing by telling the immigration judge at their very first court appearance, or they can write a letter to the judge requesting what's called a custody redetermination hearing as soon as possible, maybe even before official charges, the notice to appear, are filed.
And when they get that hearing?
They must have all their proof ready, all their documents, everything. If they're not prepared, it's usually advised to ask the judge to reschedule rather than go forward unprepared.
What does the judge actually consider when setting the bond amount or deciding whether to grant bond at all?
The judge primarily looks at two key factors to determine the bond amount, if any. First is flight risk, and second is danger to the community.
Okay, flight risk sounds fairly intuitive, like, will they show up for court? How do judges assess that?
Precisely. It's about assessing the likelihood the individual will appear for all future court dates. Judges weigh factors like their ties to the community, do they have family here with legal status, children, a steady job, do they own property like a house or even a car, how long have they lived in the U.S.?
Things that root them here.
Exactly. And of course, any history of missing court dates in the past would be a huge red flag against them.
And the second factor, danger to the community.
For danger to the community, the judge examines the person's past arrests and convictions to assess the likelihood of them committing offenses in the future if released.
So past behavior predicts future behavior in the court's eyes.
To some extent, yes. But this is also where proof of rehabilitation becomes really vital. Showing evidence of attending programs like AA or NA meetings or anger management classes can demonstrate a real change in behavior and a commitment not to reoffend. That can significantly help their case.
It sounds like you need to present a really comprehensive picture of someone's life. What kind of documents and evidence are crucial to bring to that hearing?
You really do need a comprehensive set of documents, and gathering them can be incredibly difficult, especially when someone is detained. But generally, think in broad categories.
Okay.
First, basic identity and immigration status info. Second, evidence of those strong ties to the U.S. community. We talked about family connections, employment records, proof of property ownership. Third, and this is critical, a sponsor letter.
A sponsor letter. Tell me more about that.
This is arguably the most important document. It needs to come from someone, usually a friend or family member, who has legal immigration status in the U.S., like a citizen or permanent resident.
And what needs to be in it?
It has to detail the sponsor's own legal status with proof attached, like a copy of their green card or passport. It needs to explain how they know the person in detention and, crucially, state the actual street address where the individual will live if released. And they need proof of that address, like a recent utility bill in their name.
So someone has to literally vouch for them and provide a confirmed place for them to stay. That's a big commitment.
It is. And beyond the sponsor letter, other types of evidence can really strengthen the case.
Like what?
Letters of support are very helpful from other friends, family members, employers, maybe community leaders like a church pastor or teacher.
What should those letters say?
They should explain the relationship, attest to the individual's character, saying they're a good person, responsible, and explain why they believe the person should be released and allowed to stay in the U.S. It helps to attach ID copies of the people writing the letters, and any non-English letters need a certified, signed translation.
Even personal touches.
Yes. Sometimes things like drawings from young children or family photographs can be surprisingly impactful in humanizing the person before the judge. Also, if there is a criminal history, a personal letter from the individual themselves is important.
What should they write in that?
They should explain how they've changed, what they learned from their mistakes, and express their hopes for the future, maybe about supporting their family, finding work, being a positive member of the community. Honesty and sincerity are key.
And you mentioned proving ties to the U.S.
Right. Documents showing how long they've been here. Things like old rent receipts, utility bills in their name from years past, their children's U.S. birth certificates showing their name as a parent.
What about hardship?
Yes, proof of hardship caused by the detention can be relevant. Maybe letters from debt collectors showing bills piling up or overdue notices. Evidence of caregiving responsibilities they usually handle for children or elderly parents.
And financial info. Property.
Financial information like recent tax returns, pay stubs, letters from employers. This helps demonstrate their economic situation because the judge must consider their ability to pay a bond. And proof of property, like deeds to homes, car titles, even mobile homes, further reinforces those strong ties, showing they have something to lose by leaving.
That's a lot to pull together.
It really is. You need to organize all these papers, make a clear list, and have multiple copies ready, at least 3 sets. One for the judge, one for the government attorney, and one for yourself or your lawyer.
When it comes to actually testifying, I imagine honesty, even about difficult things, is crucial.
Absolutely crucial. They should prepare what they want to say sincerely, be honest about past mistakes, but really focus on highlighting the growth the changes made, speak from the heart about the impact on their family and their plans for the future, and always answer questions respectfully, even if they're tough. Lying or being evasive will almost certainly backfire.
Okay, so let's say the judge grants bond. How is it actually paid, and who is allowed to pay it?
This is another really critical point. Only lawful permanent residents, green card holders, and U.S. citizens can pay the bond money directly to ICE.
Not the person detained, not someone without status.
Correct. And the entire amount must be paid up front, all at once. You cannot make installment payments, and you can't offer property like your house as collateral directly to ICE.
So if the bond is $10,000, you need $10,000 right then. How do you pay?
Payment must be by money order or cashier's check only. No cash, no personal checks. It has to be made out exactly to Department of Homeland Security.
Important detail.
Very. And you must write the detainee's ICE file number, that's the 9-digit A number, and their full name clearly on the check or money order.
And where does the person making the payment physically go?
They have to pay it in person, either at the detention center where the person is being held or at the nearest ICE Enforcement and Removal Operations ERO office to where the payer lives.
What about bail bond companies? Can they help with immigration bonds?
They sometimes can, yes. Bail bond companies can finance an immigration bond, but they charge a significant fee for this service, often a non-refundable percentage of the bond amount. And they almost always require substantial collateral, like Real estate equity, credit cards, valuable jewelry, car titles.
So it's costly.
Very costly.
Yeah.
And honestly, many bonding agencies are hesitant to post immigration bonds, especially if there's also a criminal issue, because the risk of the person being deported and the bond being forfeited is considered quite high.
Now, here's something interesting. Even after a judge grants bond, can ICE still stop the person from being released?
Yes, they can. Even if an immigration judge orders release on bond, ICE attorneys have the power to file an appeal and ask for an emergency stay of the judge's decision.
Just stay.
Meaning they ask to pause or stop the release order while they appeal the judge's decision to a higher body, the Board of Immigration Appeals, BIA. If the stay is granted, the individual remains detained during that appeal process. It adds another layer of uncertainty and delay.
So, okay, let's assume someone is successfully released on bond. Their case isn't over, right? What happens next?
That is maybe the most crucial point to emphasize. Getting released on bond does not mean your deportation case is ended. Not at all.
So you still have to fight the case.
Absolutely. You still have to attend every single hearing that is scheduled in your case, sometimes for years. Missing just one hearing, as we said, likely means an automatic deportation order and the complete loss of that bond money.
That's a constant pressure. What about court location? If someone is detained far from home?
That's a vital practical step. Before leaving the detention center, it's critical for the person or their attorney to ask the judge to transfer the case venue. They file what's called a motion for change of venue to move the case to the immigration court closest to where they will be living. This makes attending future hearings much more manageable.
Makes sense. Now, for the person who paid the bond, the sponsor, how do they eventually get that money back, assuming everything goes right and all hearings are attended?
Good question. The bond money is returned by IC. Eventually, if the individual attends all your hearings with the immigration court and all appointments required by IC.
What's the process for the refund?
The person who originally paid the bond needs the original paperwork they received when they paid it, especially the form called I-305, the Receipt of Immigration Officer. That's their proof of payment.
What if they lost it?
If it's lost, there's another form, the I-395, affidavit in lieu of lost receipt, which they have to fill out and get notarized. They then submit these forms, along with another form called I-391, Notice of Immigration Bond Canceled, which IC issues when the case concludes appropriately, by mail to the Debt Management Center in Williston, Vermont.
How long does that usually take?
The documentation states the process generally takes about 4 weeks once ICE confirms the conditions have been met and cancels the bond.
And conversely, what happens if the individual doesn't comply? If they miss a hearing or violate conditions?
If the individual fails to substantially comply with the terms and conditions of the bond, missing a hearing is the most common reason, then the bond is officially declared breached.
Meaning
The money is forfeited to the government, it's gone. However, any interest that might have accrued on the bond amount while it was held is still returned to the person who paid it. But the principal amount is lost.
Are there different kinds of these ICE bonds? You mentioned Form I-352.
Yes, that form covers several types. The most common one we've been discussing is the G1 delivery bond. Its main purpose is to ensure the person shows up for removal if ordered deported.
Okay. What are the others?
There's also a G2 public safety bond, which is less common, related to repaying costs if the person receives certain public assistance. Then there's a G3 voluntary departure bond, used when someone agrees to leave the country voluntarily by a certain date. The bond guarantees they actually leave. And finally, a G4 order of supervision bond, which ensures someone complies with specific supervision requirements after release, like check-ins with ICE.
So different bonds for different situations and guarantees. It's interesting how they reflect the various concerns of immigration enforcement deportation, public costs, voluntary departure supervision.
Exactly. The common thread is always leveraging that financial guarantee to manage perceived risks. But the specific risk being addressed changes with the bond type.
We've touched on criminal bonds versus immigration bonds. Can you just give us a super clear, quick distinction between the two again?
Sure. Think of it this way. A typical criminal bond often involves paying a percentage, maybe 10%, of the total bail amount to a private bail bonds company. That company takes the risk for the full amount with the court.
Right.
An immigration bond requires paying the full 100% of the bond amount directly to the government, specifically ICE, usually via that cashier's check or money order. There's no percentage payment option to ICE. It's the entire collateral held directly by the government agency.
That's a massive difference. No 10% option for IC bonds.
Correct. And this difference creates a major complication we touched on. A non-citizen might be arrested for a crime and have an ICE detainer placed on them.
Meaning they could need both types of bonds.
Potentially, yes. They might need a criminal bond to get out of local jail and an immigration bond to get out of subsequent ICE detention. And as we discussed, many bail bond companies are very wary of posting a criminal bond for someone with an ICE detainer because if the person gets transferred to ICE, the bail company might lose their money. It gets very tangled.
Okay, so we've looked at bonds facilitating education in Ireland and bonds ensuring compliance and appearance for those already caught up in the U.S. immigration system.
Two very different uses.
But what if a bond wasn't just about release from detention or compliance after entry, but about your very entry into the country in the first place?
Ah, yes.
That's exactly what seems to be on the table, with a pretty significant new development coming out of the U.S. State Department.
You're absolutely right. This brings us right up to the present, to a major potential shift. The U.S. State Department is looking to revive a pilot program, one that originated in a previous administration. A draft rule is actually set to be published, on August 4, 2025.
Today, as we're recording, wow.
Yes. And this program proposes imposing visa bonds, potentially up to $15,000 for certain non-immigrant travelers before they even get their visa.
That sounds like a really fundamental change in how visas might work for some people.
Mm.
What's the main goal here? Why are they proposing this?
Well, according to the official language, the program is explicitly designed primarily to assess the operational feasibility of posting, processing, and discharging visa bonds. Basically, can the government agencies, State Department, Treasury, DHS, actually handle the logistics of this?
So it's more about the mechanics than the policy outcome initially.
That's what they state. The stated aim is not specifically to test whether bonds will effectively reduce visa overstays, but more to understand the burden on government agencies and identify any practical challenges. It's like, can we even build the plumbing for the system before we decide if the water pressure is right?
Interesting framing. Are there other intentions mentioned?
Yes, it's also explicitly described as a potential diplomatic tool. The idea is to use it to encourage foreign governments to take all appropriate actions to make sure their citizens leave the U.S. on time.
Ah, so leverage on other countries.
Exactly. It directly addresses concerns about high non-immigrant overstay rates from certain countries, which has been an official U.S. government priority since a presidential memorandum back in 2019. It's like sending a signal. We need you to help manage your citizens' departures.
Okay, so who exactly would this pilot program affect? It's not everyone, right? What are the parameters?
No, definitely not everyone. It's designed as a 12-month pilot program, and it specifically targets applicants for B1, B2 visas.
Those are the temporary business visitor and tourist visas.
Correct. It intentionally excludes F visa students, mainly because their authorized stays are often much longer, multiple years, which wouldn't allow for assessing the full bond cycle, payment, departure, refund within the pilot's one-year time frame.
Makes sense. Who else is excluded?
It also explicitly excludes travelers from Canada and Mexico and anyone from countries participating in the visa waiver program.
So it's quite targeted. What are the specific criteria for someone to fall into this pilot program and potentially face a bond requirement?
An applicant has to meet 3 specific criteria simultaneously. First, they must be applying for that B1 and/or B2 visa. Second, they must be a national of one of the specific countries listed in the program. These are countries identified as having an overstay rate of 10% or higher based on a DHS report from fiscal year 2019.
Okay, and the third criteria?
Third, they must have already been approved by DHS for some kind of inadmissibility waiver before the visa can even be issued. So these are individuals who already needed special permission to overcome a reason they might otherwise be barred from entry.
Which countries are currently on that list, based on the 2019 overstay data?
The list provided includes Afghanistan, Angola, Bhutan, Burkina Faso, Burma, Myanmar, Burundi, Cabo Verde, Chad, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Kinshasa, Djibouti, Eritrea, the Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Iran, Laos, Liberia, Libya, Mauritania, Papua New Guinea, Sao Tome and Principe, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen.
Okay, and the bond amounts? You mentioned up to $15,000. How is the specific amount decided?
Right. The consular officers handling the visa application would have the discretion to require a bond of $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000.
Officer discretion. Based on what?
It's based on the officer's assessment of the applicant's individual circumstances. The goal stated is to set an amount sufficiently large to ensure the applicant does not overstay, but not so burdensome as to be unpayable.
A tricky balance.
Indeed. The documentation suggests the expected default amount would likely be $10,000.
It could be adjusted.
Yes. It could potentially be lowered to $5,000 if the officer believes the applicant genuinely can't afford $10,000 but still seems able to afford the trip itself. Or it could be raised to $15,000 if the applicant's circumstances, maybe they have strong family or economic ties, suggesting a higher risk of overstay, indicate that $10,000 might not be enough of an incentive to ensure they leave on time.
Where did these numbers come from? 5K, 10K, 15K?
The rationale provided connects these amounts to the potential costs associated with removal if someone does overstay. DHS calculated the full immigration enforcement lifecycle cost at roughly $14,000 per person. So the idea is that forfeited bond money could potentially reimburse the U.S. government for expenses incurred in finding and removing someone.
I see the logic there. How does the actual visa issuance work if a bond is required? Does the person apply, get told they need a bond?
Pretty much. If the consular officer determines a bond is necessary under this pilot program, they will initially deny the visa under INA Section 2211G. That's a temporary refusal, basically putting the application on hold.
Until
Until the applicant successfully posts the required bond amount with ICE using that same form I-352 we discussed earlier. Once ICE confirms the bond has been paid, the consular officer will then issue the visa.
And what kind of visa do they get?
It would be a visa valid only for a single entry into the U.S. within a 3-month window. And crucially, the visa itself would have an annotation, a note on it, indicating that a bond was required and posted.
Can applicants ask for the bond requirement to be waived?
No, the program description states there's no specific application process for an applicant to request a waiver of the bond. The authority to waive it rests solely with the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Visa Services, suggesting it would be a very rare exception, likely based on internal policy rather than individual pleas.
Okay. And then how does the bond get canceled, or how is it forfeited?
The bond is supposed to be canceled, meaning the money is returned if the visa holder substantially performs the terms and conditions.
Which mainly means leaving on time.
Primarily, yes. The process might involve the person presenting themselves to U.S. consulate officials outside the United States, maybe within 30 days of their departure, to verify their identity and prove they left the U.S. before their authorized stay expired. If they do that successfully, they get a full refund of the bond amount, plus any interest that accrued.
And if they don't? If they overstay?
If there's a substantial violation of the terms, overstaying being the main one, the bond is declared breached. The principal amount is forfeited to the U.S. government. However, just like with ICE detention bonds, the obligor, the person who paid, would still receive any accrued interest back.
This program, even as a pilot, is clearly generating a lot of discussion already. What are some of the anticipated impacts or viewpoints emerging?
Well, the State Department itself estimates a relatively small number of visas will be affected initially, maybe 200 to 300 people over the year. That would mean an initial pool of maybe up to $3 million in bonds being held, assuming an average bond of $10,000.
Seems small in the grand scheme of things.
Perhaps. But the public discussion, looking at places like Reddit where these things get debated, shows very strong and divided opinions. It really touches a nerve.
What's the general feeling from those who support this idea?
Some people see it quite positively as a good way to weed out potential overstays. They view it as a necessary barrier or check for certain travelers, arguing it helps maintain the integrity of the immigration system and ensures visitors actually stick to the terms of their visas.
Kind of a pay-to-play assurance.
You could frame it that way, yes. A financial guarantee of compliance.
And what about the concerns? What's the other side arguing?
There are significant concerns being voiced. Many argue it will actively deter legitimate tourism and business travel, especially for families, simply because of the high financial barrier.
That $15,000 figure is daunting.
Extremely. Some commenters pointed out quite starkly that not even half of Americans would have the $15K needed for the bond, just to illustrate how prohibitive that amount could be for people from many parts of the world.
What about the economic impact?
That's debated too. Some analysis, perhaps from industry associations, projects a relatively small overall drop in U.S. tourism revenue, maybe less than 0.5%, arguing that U.S. tourism relies heavily on domestic travel anyway.
But others disagree.
Yes, others paint a much bleaker picture. They argue this kind of policy, even limited, could lead to thousands becoming unemployed in the travel and hospitality sectors. and potentially cause smaller businesses going bankrupt that rely on international visitors. There's also a broader concern about perception.
Perception.
Yeah, that it could foster an image of the U.S. becoming unwelcoming, a kind of hermit kingdom, which could damage its international standing and soft power beyond just the economic effects.
So connecting this to the bigger picture, this pilot program, even if just a test of feasibility for now, it really feels like a fascinating and potentially controversial experiment. It's trying to balance national security concerns about overstays, diplomatic goals with other countries, and the sheer practicalities of global travel and finance.
It really does sit at the intersection of all those complex issues.
It definitely raises some important questions.
We've certainly covered a lot of ground today. We've explored how these financial guarantees, these bonds, function in really different immigration contexts,
Yeah, from smoothing the path for education in Ireland.
to ensuring compliance for people already in the U.S. immigration detention system.
And now, potentially, as a condition for entry itself for certain travelers coming to the U.S.
It shows how versatile and potentially contentious this tool can be.
So as governments continue to grapple with really complex immigration challenges, the use of financial bonds is clearly evolving, taking on new shapes and purposes. It leaves us with something to think about. What implications might this increasing reliance on financial guarantees have for global mobility, for economies reliant on travel and exchange, and maybe even for how we perceive international borders in the years ahead?